a futuristic dystopia, human augmentation, all wrapped up in an open world setting. That's right, we're doing Cyberpunk 2077.
Deus Ex.
What? It's not Cyberpunk 2077?
No, it's Deus Ex.
What the fuck is Deus Ex?
It's everything you said, but better. Yeah, I went there.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Obsessive Compulsive Gamer. Today, I'm Frank. I will be hosting, and Mike to my right, left, whatever you want to call it, he will be co-hosting with me today. Our topic of discussion is the Deus Ex series, because there are more than just the newest games. Today, joining us as guests, we have Gino in the top left corner there. In the top center, we have Bobby, aka Mushi Lives, returning as well.
I'm a guest today.
And also returning from the Persona podcast is our good friend AJ.
Ooh, hello, everybody. How's it going?
Alrighty, so Deus Ex. It's a very exciting series. Unfortunately, I don't think it's really gotten the due it deserves. But considering its troubled history and current hiatus, it still has a pretty good legacy. Because a little bit of history is it started with the first game back in 2000, and it was actually published by Ion Storm, which, if you're familiar with id Software, the two heads, John Carmack and John Romero, they had a split. I think it was in 1996. I think it was right around the time Quake was actually released. And John Romero started his own software company called Ion Storm. And their big game was supposed to be Daikatana. And if you're really curious about the history of that game, you can look it up. I think it has like a 64 port and the PC port, and that's already 3 too many. But despite their limited library that Ion Storm published, they did actually release Deus Ex, which is considered a cult classic. The original Deus Ex was a PC game, although it did get a port to the PS2 called The Conspiracy, Deus Ex: A Conspiracy. After that, the next game in the series was called Invisible War, and I believe that also came out on the PS2. Am I correct, Gino?
No, I think it was Xbox.
It was only Xbox?
Yeah.
Okay.
And PC, obviously, right?
Yeah. And then after that, so there was a bit of a hiatus, and then the next game in the series was actually Human Revolution, which was 2012-ish. 2011. Which is actually published by Square Enix. They actually picked up the IP, and then there were a couple of small in between games. I think there was a mobile game that was actually put on PC as well called Deus Ex: The Fall. And I don't remember if there was another one. I know there was a big DLC pack for Human Revolution called The Missing Link. And then the most recent game in the series is Mankind Divided, which really divided fans. So It had totally appropriate name. But it's interesting how it started, because to me, like the golden age of PC, the 90s, as far as those old games, it's just I really miss a lot of those days, and it's pure nostalgia. But like, to me, Deus Ex, that first one, is the pinnacle of what PC gaming was up to the end of the century. And it's got such a great story, and it's got that clunky, like not totally refined gameplay. I mean, we'll get into that, but to see how the series has evolved, it's good that it still had the life that it's had. So I'm gonna let my co-host go ahead and start with the first question.
Okay.
So, Mike.
So, first of all, just to get an idea where everyone's experience on it. First question is going to be what about Deus Ex drew you into its universe, and what games have you actually played? And I guess let's start with AJ.
All right. So what drew me into it was the atmosphere. I'm not gonna excuse me. I'm not gonna lie. It was that atmosphere, like that gritty, like undertone, like to everything, like like it's kind of not hard to describe, but it's very. And I say this like not unironically, like very RoboCop-ish, right? Very like gritty, very like tough cop on the street, and that answers like the question that the next part of the question, which was which ones have I played, which would be Human Revolution, and then Mankind Divided, and then I did play around with the original PC game, just a little bit, not a lot.
Nice. Yeah, the atmosphere is really unique, and that was the same thing that drew me into it as well. I really liked it was amazing to look at, especially Human Revolution, and that was probably my favorite game. What about you, Gino?
I never had a computer that was powerful enough to play the original, especially when it first came out. I was aware of it, and I really wanted to play it, but I had, I don't even remember what it was. If it was like Windows 95 or whatever. I mean, this is like 2000, but I'm like trailing behind. So I can never play the original. When it first came out, I tried, and I did play some of it later, and it's awesome, but I don't play PC games typically, so it was really kind of difficult for me to wrap my head around the movement and like using the keyboard, and but I did like it. Then I did play most of all of what is the Xbox one? We just said it.
Invisible War.
Invisible War.
Yeah, Invisible War, which is great. It was really people are really divided on that, and I don't know if it's for good reason. I think a lot of the groundwork that was in Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, I think a lot of it was kind of laid there. I mean, of course, in the first one, but yeah, I mean, definitely that.
I think the reasons that Invisible War had a lot of issues is because it was a lot more streamlined compared to the first one. And the reason that the first one was so popular is because you had so many options, whether it's dialogue or the leveling up. And it's actually really similar to the issues that I have with Mass Effect 1 compared to 2, is that with 2, they streamlined everything. I mean, for better or worse, it's still probably a superior game, but I still prefer the first Mass Effect game. But, it's just a personal preference. I can recognize that Mass Effect 2 is a better game, but Invisible War I think it is the worst reviewed in the whole series. Not to say that it's a bad game, but it is the worst reviewed.
And what about the series appealed to you, Gino? Like, what drew you into it?
Oh yeah, there was a question in there, wasn't there? No, I mean, I really like the whole conspiracy edge of it. I like being able to go and augment yourself, and then kind of it feels very detective oriented. It feels very dark. I mean, what else do I want to play? Nothing. Let's do that.
Nice. So, this is a first. I've never gotten to ask you a question, Bobby. So
The tables have turned.
How the turntables.
What about you?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to actually ask the question.
I can if you want me
Yeah,
to.
let's live it. Let's live it out the way.
All right. So, yes, Bobby. What drew you into the Deus Ex universe, and what games have you played?
So I'm a latecomer to the Deus Ex universe, kind of like AJ, and I mean I know Gino and I were both aware of the Deus Ex universe when it came out. I mean, he and I, well, I mean, like you, Frank, and Mike. I mean, AJ's the youngest one of us here, but even he can attest to the types of films that came out in the '80s. You know, when I think of Deus Ex, I always think of Escape from New York, and particularly just movies of that era that were very what's the word? Not apocalyptic, but dystopian, right? And that's pretty much what Deus Ex is. It's a cyberpunk style game, and it takes place in a dystopian future. As a matter of fact, your very first mission takes place on Liberty Island, and that's part of what. So this is why Invisible War became more streamlined, is because the original Deus Ex, particularly that Liberty Island mission area, was very difficult to get through. It was like, you guys remember, I don't know if any of you guys remember playing the original Driver game on PS1, where the tutorial alone was harder than the rest of the game. And Liberty Island is essentially a tutorial, right? It teaches you all the elements of how to play without actually teaching you anything. You have to go through and figure out everything out. You know, it'll give you little hints about, oh, you can pick up these items and you can do that. But ultimately, you need to learn how to stealth your way through it. You have to learn how to use whatever you have around you to get through it. So there's not a lot of hand-holding. So for a lot of players, they go through that Liberty Island and they get frustrated. They go, like, I tried playing that game 3 different times before I finally got through Liberty Island, and then got through about halfway through the game, and then I got distracted and didn't play it. So I actually have not finished Deus Ex. I toyed around a little bit with Invisible War on my Xbox because I was able to get a copy of it. I do have PC copies of Deus Ex, like physical copies now, and so now I can play it legitimately. And then I bought it on Steam anyway. There's a nice patch for it, for you to put it on, for you to play on Steam for the original Deus Ex. But ultimately, it comes back to that, you know, being an 80s child and loving movies like RoboCop and Escape from New York, They Live, and being able to then interact with that kind of world. So you got the cyberpunk aspect, you got the dystopian aspect, you got the conspiracy theories. You know, being a kid loving X-Files back then, because that's when X-Files was coming out, you have all the conspiracy theory stuff in X-Files. And then playing this game which says, oh yeah, even there are conspiracy theories, you know, it reinforces that whole mystery of the world, even though it's all a bunch of bullshit. And then, of course, you have the cybernetic aspect of it, where these humans who are modding their bodies in order to become more powerful, right? And but yeah, it was all those things that drew me into it. And even though I didn't get to play them until much later, I still followed what Deus Ex was. I didn't, like Gino, I didn't have a PC able to play it. I heard it wasn't worth playing it on the PS2. It was better to play it on the PC, which is why I never picked that up. You know, I never had an Xbox until, you know, Frank helped me out with that situation about 4 years ago now, and hooked me up with one. So I never had a chance to, you know, dig into Invisible War. And then, like with that PC copy I found, I just got lucky and found it at a used bookstore down in San Antonio, and I, you know, was there for like $10 and I picked it up. So yeah, that is it. Really, my experience with Deus Ex is with Mankind Divided and the previous entry, A Human Revolution. I did play The Fall. Chronologically, The Fall is the very first game in the series. Then it's Human Revolution, Mankind Divided, and then the Deus Ex 1 and
the original,
right, and then Invisible War.
And then Invisible War.
So, yeah, then
kind of like Devil May Cry, where the second one is the last in the timeline, and it's the worst one.
Which is good because you don't have to play it.
Right, there you go. You're not going to miss anything, right? Unless they make a sequel to it. Then you're like, oh, shit, now I got to play through that.
And it's going to be Visible Battle.
They're no longer invisible.
And it's not quite a war anymore, you know. It's just a scuffle.
Visible scuffle?
There you go.
That'd be visible peace. Total opposite. It'll be the most boring game in the franchise.
So, like, the other thing, like, my love of Deus Ex also comes from the a few of the other medias that they have. Like, they do have books. There's a couple books based on Deus Ex. I've actually read the book titled Icarus Effect, which is essentially a prequel to Human Revolution. It kind of takes place at the same time as The Fall. As a matter of fact, the main character you play in there, I believe, is the main protagonist in the book as well. And so there's a connection between those. Like the game The Fall it takes place before Human Revolution, but there's parts of the missions that take place concurrently with the beginning of Human Revolution. So they kind of do overlap a little bit, but the book itself takes place before Human Revolution. It's an entertaining book. I mean, it's what it is for simple sci-fi storytelling. They try to keep the espionage in there, but it's done in a way that they expect fans to read it are probably uneducated. No, I'm just being an ass. But no, I mean it's written in a simple way, right? I mean it's supposed to be a quick, easy read. So it was pretty entertaining for what it was.
And that's kind of to pair what you and AJ have said. It's like for me, I have very limited experience. Like I have the first game. I do have the mod, the GMDX, which upscales the graphics, cleans it up. Of course, my problem is that the gamma on it is so freaking ridiculously low. So it's almost unplayable right now because when I get to Liberty Island, it's almost pitch black. I can see like a few of the lights in the. I don't know. I just got to mess with the settings, but I went through Liberty Island. It's very difficult. And then Human Revolution, I did play through the first mission, but I have a motion sickness issue with it, so I haven't been able to actually go back to it. And then of course. I heard bad things about Invisible War. Looking at the gameplay, it doesn't really appeal to me. And then I do want to play Mankind Divided, but and we'll get into it, in a later question. But when Mike told me about it too, I'm like, oh man, that sounds not great as far as story issues and stuff like that.
The gameplay is good, but
we'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. Just. I guess to answer the question a little bit, I've really only played Mankind Divided and Human Revolution. I haven't really played too many of the other games, but from what I have played, especially Human Revolution, I absolutely love like what they do and just all the characters and the environment and everything. To me, for some reason, it feels a little bit like kind of a Blade Runner type thing in a way.
Yeah. I think it's that overall cyberpunk aesthetic and also, conspiracy. And that's another thing too, is that the way I heard about Deus Ex is I was actually watching a YouTube video where it talked about how some of the dialogue options in Deus Ex are like way ahead of their time and talking about government conspiracies. And they somehow tied it to like 9/11, but then you watch it and it's just, there's a lot of interesting parallels because of like what happened with, once the Iraq War started and stuff like that, and corporations, and just the parallels were just really interesting. And that's actually how I heard about it. And this was like, I don't know, 2009, 2010. So, I mean, there was kind of like a dark period where I wasn't really following games as much as I did when I was younger. I'd say between the years of like 99 to 2002, 2003, it was just kind of like whatever was really popular I would get. So Deus Ex, I completely missed. I didn't even hear about it until way later. But the dialogue and the story is always what's hailed in just about every single game for sure. So, since we're talking about just the story and gameplay, Mike brought up the gameplay. This will kind of transition into our next question. And next question is... Sorry, give me 1 second.
No problem.
I don't remember. I don't remember word for word. Okay. How do you feel about the shooter/RPG style of gameplay? Because it's not a proper FPS and it's definitely not a full RPG. Like, I think it's very unique in that way. But I'm going to go ahead and start with Gino on this question. So how do you feel about the gameplay, the shooter/RPG style that they've developed?
I don't have a problem with it. I'm not the biggest first-person shooter fan, that's for sure. But it keeps it very, I mean, it feels different when you're playing it. So I was never like overwhelmed with like, boredom of like playing a first person shooter. I mean, there was always elements, the detective elements and the cyberpunk setting. And I mean, there was always something to keep my interest. So yeah, I mean, no problem there.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, to follow up on what
You don't really want to.
I'll follow up on what Gino
really
said.
The reason is when we get to Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, I have a lot to say. So I'm kind of
All right.
bring my.
I mean,
Well,
I mean that
we're talking about the series in general, so that's including those games, and we're talking about the
Yeah.
shooter RPG.
this is
style
why
of
you need
gameplay.
to read the questions before the podcast, Gino.
we don't have another specific question for what you want to talk about.
Yeah, we don't have like, oh, what do you think about Human Revolution and Mankind Divided compared to the other games? Like specifically, this question is covering everything because they all basically have that general same style of gameplay. It's just more refined in the later games. That's kind of the point of the question.
Well, I'll shoot one at you then. Like, what do you think about each game's design, like gameplay wise, for Human Revolution and Mankind Divided? I'm just repeating what you basically told me.
No. I mean, I really don't have much. I never really have much to say about mechanics of a game. I mean, I really don't.
You just said, I have so much to say about Human Revolution
No, he's
and Mankind
he's
Divided.
right though. He
I do.
does because
it doesn't
I don't want to
Yeah.
speak for him, but
yeah, I really just the thing I'm least interested in most of the time in video games is the mechanics of it all, because it's all very. I mean, I just want an experience. So if I'm going to be in first person and I'm going to do shooting and whatever with RPG elements, okay, what's the experience? So I kind of look at everything as just kind of like a whole picture instead of, well, I'm doing this and I don't really like this, but yeah, I mean, but I have a lot to say, so you'll see.
Actually, I think our final question will be good for
no,
Gino.
and I think because one of the things I didn't address when you guys were asking the first question is one of the major reasons I actually dove into finally playing Deus Ex as opposed to just, following the story was because of Gino, because of his love, particularly for Human Revolution. And he's going to talk in detail about that, so I'm not going to talk for him. But because of his passion about it, it drove me to play the game. And I loved it. Now, I can speak more towards the mechanics. I do think about the mechanics of games and whether I enjoy them or not. And in the case of, like, I think I've played enough of the original Deus Ex. I haven't played through about a little bit more than halfway through it. And then, of course, playing Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. So even though Human Revolution and Mankind Divided are based on the mechanics of Deus Ex, to me, it doesn't have quite the same amount of freedom as the original Deus Ex. However, that's also to its detriment because there's so much freedom and so much, non-directional or no directions of what to do or how to handle things. That's why it's so easy for players to get lost. And I think, again, that's why we come back to Ion Storm kind of streamlining Invisible War. I do think they went too far one way. They should have met somewhere in the middle. But unfortunately, they didn't get a chance to make a sequel to that game because they went defunct. And that's why we didn't see another Deus Ex for such a long time. But towards the mechanics themselves, I mean, for me, fundamentally, I think the mechanics are well done enough, particularly in the more modern games, where you have the balance of you can be the tank and go in there and blow shit up and not worry about who you harm. Or you can be as stealth as possible. You can Metal Gear the hell out of the game and not kill anybody except for the bosses and deal with them. There is a bit of a broken portion of it in Human Revolution. You guys probably remember when the very first boss you had to fight in Human Revolution was that big old tank guy with the rocket launcher.
Yeah.
If you were pure stealth, he was extremely difficult to beat. And then the director's cut, they fixed that up. They patched it out. And but initially in that original run, which is the one Gino and I played, the only reason I was able to beat him so easily is I took a rocket launcher with me just in case, because I saw how big the guy was and that helped me out. But I remember Gino telling me he had such a hard time with that boss. And that's just a balancing issue. It's not that the mechanics themselves are broken. It's just they didn't balance the boss right for that battle. But aside from that one boss, the rest of the bosses were challenging and you could beat them in multiple different ways. And that's just a testament to how well the game design is in there. On top of that, you have how amazingly detailed that game world is. I mean, no matter what building you're in, there's There's documents lying around that you can read and get more about the world. There's all the digital books that you can pick up and read to find out the history of what caused the revolution, why there's all these people who are angry about what's going on and how it's hurt the world. I mean, stuff that you don't need in order to beat the game, but stuff that definitely fleshes out the world, which is very important for this world building. Even though the original Deus Ex had a lot of that, the way it's done in Human Revolution in particular is in such a way that it makes you feel that you really are in a real world, in a place that can actually exist, just because of how fleshed out it is. And the way the characters have been developed in that game is amazing. But again, back from a gameplay standpoint, yeah, I think it's very well balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I do appreciate what they did in the director's cut for that specific boss, because I always thought, I played both versions, and it was weird. If I wanted to do stealth, now all of a sudden I'm an action hero for this one fight.
Yeah.
It just felt kind of weird to me. And then the director's cut, addressed that. It lets you do the alternate way to beat that guy. So that was pretty, I liked what they did there.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, it's really interesting that they went back and addressed that issue, because, had they not cared about what the fan feedback, they could have just been like, well, that's just the way it is. But, they went back, and I think you can beat that whole game in director's cut as stealth, right?
Absolutely. You can now.
Now you can.
And to me, I think that's really cool. Because you can still play that original experience, or you have the newer updated version. Excuse me. But what about you, AJ? Well, as far as the gameplay elements go.
Gameplay elements? I love the modern games, right? The intro mission for Human Revolution was just so mind-blowing to me. Just because it was so different from any other intro mission that I had ever played before. It's you really clearly saw your choices right before you start. It's oh, you want the shotgun or the tranquilizer rifle? And I'm like, tranquilizer rifle, sure, why not? And then I realized I got to start sneaking through the vents and being careful, and so it was really cool. And then my favorite mission from the whole franchise really would have to be the second mission right after the intro mission, where you have to go into the police department. And gameplay mechanic, I was okay, cool, I'm just gonna walk in, they're gonna let me in, cool, ex-cop, haha. And then the guy at the door was I don't like you, why are you here? And so I was oh, I failed the dialogue checks. I was what do I do now? I'm locked out of the police department. And then you could literally hop over the fence and sneak into a vent to go up. So I was wow, that's really cool that yeah, maybe I failed the speech check, but now I can just sneak around. And but I had to literally hop a fence, and I was stuck on that for ever. I was how do I get into this police department? I was I don't know what to do. And I finally was oh, then we'll just hop the fence, climb up the vent. I was all right, cool. And then I was so happy. I was I get to do the rest of this mission now. and then the side quests were pretty cool too in that game. They had their own cool little narrative arcs,
Yeah.
and that tied in more or less with the main storyline. I also like the inventory management. That was a lot of fun too. It's its own little mini game in a sense, because you have to make sure okay, it takes up this many dimensions. I have to rotate it, make sure everything's good.
It's like Resident Evil almost, with their inventory menu.
With 4?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's and you mentioned mini games, and that's one thing I didn't talk about is the mini games in there. I thought were a lot of fun, the hacking. I actually really enjoyed them.
Yeah, the hacking too was a lot of fun. That's one of my favorite aspects of doing a stealth gameplay would be the hacking, just because they're tough little puzzles on their own that make you think let me figure out this way. And so yeah, it's pretty cool.
I did actually have trouble with the hacking at first too. I got the hang of it eventually, but that first one, I was the hell are all these symbols? It took me a while to get into it.
Yeah. And yeah, so I also like the RPG elements to it, level up, select your skill tree, what do you want to go down, so that's always it scratches a lot of boxes for me that I really love.
Yeah, that action RPG, it I think it's pretty hard to do it well, honestly, because usually it's more one or the other. And I think one thing, I mean, I haven't played them as much as you guys obviously have, but I mean, just what I have played, having those options, the skill trees and everything like that, I feel like it's balanced pretty well, you know, and especially with the options for pure combat or the stealth. Having those options, you know, you can actually go back and almost play like a completely different game just because of your method. And having that kind of replayability is definitely, I think, a testament to how well that game is designed. I mean, especially for the newer, for Human Revolution specifically, I'm not sure if Mankind Divided is as dedicated to that.
Oh yeah, they are.
They are? So both? Okay. And then, of course, the original, that gameplay is rough. You know, I'd say that's definitely where it falters the most in the original game, because there's no hand holding at all. You know, you're just thrown to the wolves, and it's like, all right, I'm going to upgrade, you know, the sniper rifle all the way, or I'm going to, you know, pistol or shotgun, or, you know, lock picking. Like they kind of like Mass Effect 1, they give you so many things that you can upgrade, but it's definitely worse in Deus Ex because you have more things like swimming. You know, are you really going to swim enough to where you need to upgrade that skill? So I can't really speak at all for Mankind, or not my Invisible War. Because I mean, who's really played that one?
I have not.
Yeah,
No one has.
I mean, I've played Invisible War.
Don't lie, Gino. You've never played
a decent way through.
it.
I believe you guys.
Okay, I never played it.
Sorry, Gino. Continue.
No, that's okay.
I feel like we're picking on Gino.
we always pick on Gino, but it's because he does shit like, oh, I'm gonna get into it, but not right now, even though it's the question that you're supposed to be getting into it.
No, seriously. So Invisible War. So how is it compared to the rest of these?
I mean, you know, one of the things that it doesn't do, that the others do really well, is put you into that world enough. But it really does, it does some really neat things. So I do remember there's like this mission. There's a couple missions that were mind-blowing when I played them, I remember. There's one where like you go to this club, and I remember you get dragged back to somebody's house, and like you have to like, I don't even remember, but it was really cool. But then like right after that, you know, you meet this like alien faction, and they're like, hey, like come join us and we'll do all these great things for you. And you know, you get the choice, like, do you want to come with them and like go do their shit, or do you want to go over here? So it had a lot of really neat things. And I think I stopped playing because I got stuck somewhere. But you know, when I was into it, it was engrossing. And I really, you know, I saw like, I was like, well, what are these people complaining about? It's really neat. But you know, having played Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, now I kind of see like where their problems were. And then the original one, yeah, I mean that gameplay is kind of rough, right? But I do see a lot of Invisible War in Human Revolution and Mankind Divided too. So, you know, I guess it's just to your taste.
I think part of it is because there are some aspects of Invisible War where the ideas were good, because again, they're trying to streamline a process that in the original Deus Ex wasn't very intuitive. You know, the keyboard controls that they had in there did not make it easy in order to switch between weapons, did not make it easy for you to determine, you know, what was the best path for you to follow, because, you know, it wasn't very clear that the game was as open as it was. They just kind of dumped you in it. So you know, at that time, what were we playing? We were playing first-person shooters. This is a first-person game, and people are thinking, well, of course I got to max out all my guns so I can blast through everything. And that's not the way the game was intended to be played, right? People had to learn how to play it the right way, but because it was so new, its style, that's why it kind of fell off the way it did. Like, even though it's so highly regarded because of its story and because of what it brought in, we talk about games all the time that changed gaming, but that doesn't mean the first game is perfect, right? They did mechanics that were incredible for the time, but since then those mechanics have been refined. And what Invisible War tried to do was try to take those mechanics and streamline them, but I think it really didn't get fixed until Human Revolution. I think Human Revolution is really the one that did it right, and did it in a way that made it effective, and which is why that game is so popular and why people are now revisiting those original games.
Yeah. So I think that kind of will lead into our next question for my co-host to ask you all.
Yeah, so kind of going still along the lines of the gameplay, kind of just to get an idea how everyone approached the games differently. And I guess kind of I only played Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, but what was your I'm sorry, I'm having a few technical issues here. What was your play style like in these games? Was it more focused towards combat or stealth? And I'll start with Bobby.
I probably leaned more towards stealth. It was hard for me because I'm one of those guys that likes to balance everything out. Like, we did a Star Wars episode and we talked about games like Knights of the Old Republic, and that's a game where you have a light side or dark side. And I always wanted to be that guy right in the middle because I wanted to take advantage of both sides. And it's the same thing here with this game where I wanted to be stealthy, but still have the ability to, survive a firefight if, stealth didn't work out, because I hate failing missions. I hate feeling like I have to stick to one side of the coin or the other. So yeah, I probably leaned more towards stealth, but I built my character in a way that he was still proficient in specific types of firearms, like, a handgun and maybe a heavy type of weapon. I gave him abilities to do things like punch through walls. So if I need to escape quickly in a firefight, I could find a hole in the wall and punch through it and escape, So I tried to play it more balanced. And it worked out. I mean, I never felt frustrated. I never felt like the game was working against me, and I never felt like I couldn't beat it. So, I mean, I was able to get through it without any issues. And yeah, I mean, I think again that's just a testament to the game design and the planning out of the game itself by the developers.
Yeah, it's really nice that it allows you to make that decision too. The worlds are pretty open in itself, but just the way you can approach the game is open too. It gives you so many different options. What about you, AJ?
I always streamlined everything towards stealth. I don't know why. It was just, for me, that was always the most fun. Sneaking around in the air vents, and then using once you start getting able to spec out your weapons and apply mods and change everything up, how they function, like the basic tranquilizer gun that you start out with in Human Evolution could really knock people out, even through thick armor, and you could even upgrade your 10mm your hand cannon, handgun, whatever it's called, and put a silencer on it, and just poof, it was so much fun. So I would always do stealth just because it was the fun of sneaking around in the vents, finding those cool hidden little stuff. You would find upgrades and hidden little things in vents and stuff like that, and alternate puzzle solutions. And so that was always just fun for me, just finding out all this other ways and looking at the road less taken, right?
Yeah.
So then I would try to do I tried my second playthrough to be more combat-y, more face-to-face and aggressive, but I couldn't do it. It wasn't as fun for me. So I stuck with stealth for the longest time. And even in Mankind Divided, I'm playing through it again right now, and I'm yeah, stealth, woo.
It's I totally get what AJ's saying about the satisfaction, because there were times where I would go combat heavy just because of the situation I was in. And then after all the dust settled, I would look around and go, oh, had I just found that vent and snuck in through it, I could have avoided all of this.
Yeah, exactly. And then there would be sometimes where the stealth option would kind of like lead you to like either having to be even like spec'd out more to stealth, or you would end up like in this huge firefight and you're just like, oh no. So it's like you'd have to prepare yourself for like either or. And there were a few times where like I got caught in a firefight that I wasn't ready for, and I'd have to restart and like look at different paths again. So I was like, man.
And the nice thing too is the game wasn't so unforgiving that if you died in an area, it's not like you were sent so far back that you couldn't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are good checkpoints in that game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very good checkpoints.
Yeah.
Like even on the PC version, like speaking of checkpoints, remember like quick saving a lot. So I'd be like, all right, I need to replay the last 10 seconds because I didn't go exactly the way I wanted to go.
Were you pointing at Gino, Frank?
Because he was. Are you paying attention, Gino?
Hey, he's there.
He's just leaning over.
I'm right here.
It's because you leaned over and your shirt's black and it blended in with the couch, so we thought you had left.
That's fair enough.
What about you, Gino?
Mr. Metal Gear.
Yeah.
I already know the answer to this, but
Yeah. I if there's one fucking thing I'm tired of in video games, unless you're playing fucking Doom, like enough with the guns already. You know what I mean? Let's do something else. And not to say that isn't fun. It is. But when you're given the option to do anything else, I'll always pick something else because it's like, oh, good, they gave me more guns. Oh, great, But yeah, I think I made it through Mankind Divided without killing anybody, and I think in Human Revolution, I killed like 1 or 2 people by accident, and I was pissed. So I need to go through and do it again.
Look, Gino's a guy who will go through Metal Gear multiple times for the purpose of getting a no-kill run, or no, even a no detection run. Right? You've done those before.
Have done, will do again. Which not to get off.
That is impressive.
It's Metal Gear Solid 2's birthday, so we have to just celebrate that just for a quick moment. So
Happy
that
birthday,
was the
Metal
moment.
Gear Solid 2.
Happy birthday.
Nice. After Veterans Day.
You know what, man? I give you guys total kudos because I don't have the patience for stealth gameplay overall. Like the first mission, I mean, besides the intro mission, and then when you're trying to stop the terrorists in the first mission of Human Revolution, like I did the best I could to just not kill anybody. So I knocked people unconscious. I moved their bodies. I shot them with the tranquilizer guns. But it's like so annoying that it's like, oh, he's been discovered. Okay, I got to knock that guy out. Oh, the other guy's up now. I got to knock him out. And it's like I just don't have the patience for it, and that's why like I've never been able to get into the Dishonored series. Metal Gear, I have like a love-hate relationship with, and it's mostly just because.
Oh, you love it because you love
shut
it.
up,
You love it.
No, I love the story and stuff. Like the gameplay, I have issues with. Like I just don't like the sneaking around. It's even like in the Arkham games when you have to sneak around. I'm like, like let me just kick somebody's ass. Like why? Like I understand like maybe sneaking around a little bit, but no, I just don't have the patience for it. And I think that's probably why I haven't really, dived into just doing a pure stealth gameplay, just because I just don't have the patience. To me, that's not fun. And not to say that it isn't fun for everybody, but it's something that I'm not enjoying. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant to go back to it in addition to the motion sickness.
Like if I can bring up Aldo, you guys, I remember Aldo did not like Human Revolution. He made it clear that he didn't like the game. And then one day he decided to play it again. And this is because like Gino and I think Mike were talking about it and how good it was. And he went back and played it. And he played it totally combat. He went in as a tank, destroyed everything, punched people when they told him no, didn't take no for an answer. And he loved it. He came back and he said how much he really loved that game. And I mean, again, that's a testament to how well designed that game is, that you can play it totally stealth like Gino and AJ. You can go lukewarm like I did, go half and half, or you can go balls out like Aldo did. And
I play both sides. That way I always come out on top.
so, I mean, and I think that's the beauty of the game. Now, so I totally get the motion sickness, and that's totally understandable, because I know this is not a single game issue. There's been other games that you've talked about where you've had that issue. But if you can figure out a way to get over it, yeah, I think give it another shot. Totally be worth it. And I was going to bring this up at the end, but I would recommend playing the director's cut on the Wii U if you can get a copy of it. Okay,
I have a
because
copy of
that one I think is the best version, and I really think the touch controls on the gamepad, especially for the mini games, is very well implemented. And it's just, to me, it's a superior version. But that's just a personal opinion. But the rest of you are wrong if you disagree.
Man, poor Wii U.
Yeah.
Let's just tip our hats to the poor console that just never had a chance. I
still have stuff in here, so I can't.
I mean, if you think about it, like, okay, so Nintendo, just a sideline really quick. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, solid. Nintendo 64 is when it kind of took a dip. It was a really popular system. It did sell well, but it did divide fans. And then the next one was the GameCube, which didn't sell well at all. Then you got the Wii, which sold. It's one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Then you had the Wii U. Then poor Wii U.
I always see the Wii U as like the transition between the Wii and the Switch. Kind of like
I agree.
trying out like different things to see what
the gamepad, you know.
But that whole thing, I mean, I liked my Wii U. I spent a lot of time on it. I mean, I played Zelda on it. I played Bayonetta and all those games.
Yeah, just didn't have the third-party support. And I love that system. It's my Fatal Frame machine.
Fatal Frame was cool on it. But going slightly back to Deus Ex, like I do have it. I do have it on the Wii U, and I agree with Bobby on the touch controls because that was really cool. But I hated having to hold the tablet through that game. That was a little uncomfortable.
That I can understand.
Yeah. And you had to.
Oh, really? I was going to ask if you could just use the Pro controller.
Yeah, but you still have to use the tablet. I can't even remember if it worked, but like it was still awkward because you were switching between both of them. But I can't remember for sure. I want to say that you couldn't use a controller in that game.
I never did. I had no problem using the tablet. But I totally get, because it's kind of like with the Switch 2, where at least the Switch isn't as clunky as the tablet for the Wii U, but you hold that Switch because it's wide and you're holding it this long that it tends to, after a while, feel like, okay, I need to put it down for a bit.
The problem with the Wii U was that it was like you were playing a portable console that wasn't portable.
Yeah.
Like you were playing a portable game, but you still needed a television for it. It's just weird for me.
Oh, man. Nope. Stealth gameplay. It's just so frustrating to me. Which sucks because it means I'm missing out on really great games. Like the Thief series, Dishonored, Metal Gear to an extent, and Deus Ex. But you know what it is? I think it's because when I play those games, I already have it in my head. It's more to give you that alternate, stealth experience. I mean, I played the first mission of Human Revolution, just like I did with the first mission of Dishonored, challenging myself to do it all, like not necessarily no detection, but it's like no kills, trying to do it as minimal combat as possible. And I think maybe I just need to stop challenging myself and just actually try to enjoy the game.
I can get it. I can get your opinion on things like Dishonored or whatever that are geared towards that. But Deus Ex is a game where you really can. You don't have to do stealth.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should try to give it a try. I mean, motion sickness. I know that's an
issue.
Well, I think Dishonored is another good example of a game that balances out those pretty well. I mean, I do think it does lean a little bit more towards stealth, but I've watched people tear through that game without using stealth abilities.
Oh, yeah.
And now, granted, they've been playing it a lot, but I mean, even when I played Dishonored, I didn't always play stealthy. You know, I killed people and didn't hide bodies, and I would kill multiple enemies at once. But to me, they're...
Yeah, but then that affects the ending.
Sure, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that at the time, so it didn't matter. I just wanted to play through the game, enjoy it, and if I got the ending I got, if I want to see a different ending, then you have to change your gameplay style. And I mean, I don't feel obligated to have to play a game again just to see a different ending. I mean, I play the game for the total enjoyment of the package, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, I got this ending. Fuck that. I'm going to play through this game again just because I'm angry about the ending. No, I'm not going to do that.
Imagine being like that. It couldn't be me.
I usually do all sides, man. Like Mass Effect, I was Paragon and Renegade. But did I get did I ask everyone that question?
You did. I think you didn't really elaborate yourself on as much.
For me, it was just stealth. For me personally, I felt that fit the character of Jensen like more. Like I feel that he was a guy who would stealth approach all those situations. And kind of like AJ was talking about that second mission with the police station. I tried to gun my way in there the first time because I was just like, let's see what happens, and I got like killed right away. So then when I found the vents that I could get in there, I thought that was cool. So from that point on, I was always looking at every situation. I was always like, okay, there's got to be something around the corner in an alley or whatever. And that in itself became like a puzzle element of the game too.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed just finding all these different ways to approach situations. And that was a lot of fun for me. So I mainly did stealth in the game for Human Revolution.
Cool. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and ask this next question since we've talked so much about the gameplay itself and everything like that. I thought we kind of take the questioning in a little bit of different direction for Deus Ex, and that would be if you could pick one enhancement of all the enhancement and upgrades in the series, which one would you pick to have in real life and why? And it's limited to only one. And I'm going to start with AJ.
Man. You know what? I'm not going to lie. I would totally pick the social enhancement one, the one that showed you like people's pheromone levels and like what their alpha beta waves and all that stuff, and they're like, this person thinks like an alpha, this person's an omega. I'd be like, give me that one, like, because I'm awkward, so I'd be like, oh, this person's like, all right, cool. Hands down, that'd be the one I'd pick right away. Just I'd be like, all right, cool.
You know, it was funny because I was talking to somebody, and when we were hypothetically talking about enhancements or, you know, superpowers and stuff, it's like if you could pick the ability to fly or be invisible, so many people pick invisible, and it's like you're not going to do that like as a good thing for anybody. There's no good thing that comes from being invisible. You're doing it because you don't want people to see the fucked up shit that you're going to try to do. That you're going to be a pervert and you're going to spy on women, or you're going to try to kill somebody without anybody, you know, like.
You know what? I would be a pervert, totally. I'm not going to deny that. But it would be awesome when I'm at work if I knew somebody was looking for me, like to do something, if I could just turn invisible, like right in my office, so they think I wasn't there. I would use that.
You're still going to be at your computer.
I would use it for that.
Typing at the keyboard, and someone's going to be like, holy shit, yeah. Mike's office is haunted.
It'd be like, hey, Mike, I need you to do this. And like, I guess he's not here. You know, I totally do that. Nobody in the office would ever know that I work there still, like for years.
You'll still be pulling a paycheck.
No, and
it's like, Mike's never here, but he's getting all his work done. That's so weird. I guess we'll pay him anyway.
Yeah, it's all that matters, man. It's all that matters.
No, I think it's funny. And you know what, AJ? Then you'd be able to like go into like sales and just make a killing.
Exactly. Or like public
Be like,
speaking,
hey.
public office, and be like, hey, I know what y'all want.
Man, but that's a lot of people though. That's a lot of pheromones to read. You're really like
This is
looking
true.
through the crowd. You're like, okay.
That's
What about you, Gino?
You know the like in Mankind Divided where he has that like gun-proof thing. He turns into that. I don't know what it is. Like he turns into like a brick of glass or something. I think I'd just do that just because it would be such a parlor trick. You know, everyone I'd ever meet for the first time, they're like, "Oh, you can do that." I'm like, yeah, look, and it would, you know, then the thrill would be over. But like, it would be there every time, right? So I could like meet all these new people under the guise of like, "You want to see this cool thing, right?" And then, like, you know, if ever I was caught in the middle of some urban war, then, you know, it would be a bonus. So I'll go with like, you know, Kevlar body thing.
Nice.
always
Never
thinking
knew
ahead,
it.
Gino.
Urban war.
I don't think I'm that much different than Gino because there's this augmentation ability that when you fall from heights, you can create this.
You take no fall damage.
Well, yeah, the Icarus landing system. There you go. And I like I'm not really big on heights, and you know it's a human thing, right? Where like heights are scary, but if I had that Icarus landing system, I could climb, you know, go up high mountains or things, and then be able to like, hey, I'm just gonna like jump off this mountain, and I'll be okay. That way, you can experience the terror, without actually being afraid of getting injured from it. Even though technically you could do something like that with bungee cords, I still worry things like that will snap and I'll die. But you know, so yeah, for me it would be that Icarus landing system.
I would do that also, and I would use it at work as well. So at the end of the day, I can just jump out the window, like, all right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, and just like jump out.
I don't know why Mike's not here, but his fucking window's always broken. Oh man, that's good.
No man,
I get bored at work a lot, if you can tell.
Your mind wanders clearly. What about you, Mike? So, I mean, would you go with the invisibility one?
I think I'd rather have invisibility, just because I think I can do more with that. I don't know.
Get away with more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
What about you?
For me, I think I'd honestly choose like the rapid healing. So, you know, that way I wouldn't have to worry about the like medical insurance anymore. Like I can just be like, nah, I don't need it. And then, you know, hopefully eventually when we get universal healthcare, I'll be like, I'm covered anyway. But thanks. I'm glad everybody else is able to get their needs taken care of. But I mean, because I think about everything, all the other, you know, abilities that you have, you know, it's like you have better weapon handling, or you have like augmented strength. And on a practical day-to-day basis, I'm not really going to use those. So, I mean, but where I can, you know, eat like garbage, or I can get into a car accident and I'd be like, nah, I'm like, I'll just heal myself.
Sir,
you know,
your leg's broken. I'll just walk it off.
Like, passing something in an alley, you'd be like, you know, what the hell? Let's give it a shot. Let's eat it.
Hey, floor pizza. No, I mean,
you can eat gas station sushi.
You know, that's do gas stations have sushi?
I'm sure.
Well, remember that.
Yeah.
That's how Fry got those parasites in him that kept him perfectly healed in Futurama. So.
Oh, that's right.
That was a egg salad sandwich.
But wasn't it from a gas station?
Yeah, okay. It was from a gas station.
But that's not sushi.
I mean, it might as well be at that point.
I know, it's like, it's negligible. I mean, You know what's funny is that I did see a YouTube ad for 7-Eleven and their pizzas and burgers. I'm like, who the hell is like, oh man, that looks so good. Let's go down to the 7-Eleven to get a pizza and a hamburger.
Yeah, that's I'm late to a meeting and I had to gas up my car, and this is like my only option at the moment. I don't think anybody like wants to go there for food.
Yeah.
Well, in defense of people who find 7-Eleven food attractive, when I was young and my mom wasn't working and it was just my dad, we didn't have a lot of money. So on Fridays when he would get paid, our big thing was to go to 7-Eleven and get nachos with chili sauce and get some chimichangas
that's okay.
and a Slurpee.
Yeah, we did that. We did that in high school, too, and stuff like that. I mean, not knocking it, but it's just like it's just not something you think
right.
of.
It's not like we were watching commercials and seeing commercials for 7-Eleven chimichangas going, holy shit, that would hit the spot right now.
This question is really
yeah, we're not even talking
veered
about
off
anymore, man. We're not even talking about video games at this point.
Yeah. No, all the enhancements are pretty cool, but a lot of them they serve a very particular purpose in a dystopian world. So, that's why I thought it'd be interesting to hear your responses, because if we were to get them in now, because to me, like, augmentations in general, I think are a really interesting concept. Like, I totally augment my body. Like, give me my robot heart. Like, I'd take that. I want my automatic glasses that give me night vision and everything like that. Like, that'd be cool. But
I want robot hair.
I want Jensen's sunglasses.
Oh, sorry, AJ. That was just. It's like
just let me think about the way I want to style it and just be like, you know what? I want to go like super long.
Like one of those Play-Doh hair guys where you just squish it down in there. I think the game, like we're talking about these augmentations, like, oh, this was to be so neat, but I think the game really does a great job of handling in a way where, like, the character Adam Jensen has these augmentations forced on him because at the beginning of the game, right, he gets his ass blown up, and so he loses all these body parts, and they replace all these parts. Right, it wasn't something he wanted to have, and I
didn't ask for this.
But of course, he takes advantage of it and uses it, and he shows how he can use them well. But the other thing that they deal with is all these people who have augmentations are also dealing with the fact that their body rejects the augmentations, right? Because they're mechanical, and of course they're human, and so there's this huge issue with this drug that they need, and there's this whole conspiracy theory about, well, they make it seem like there's a shortage of the drug, so that way they can hike up the prices and people have to pay ludicrous prices. And then you have people like, people who can't afford it, or because it's so expensive, they're living on the streets. So
like
that's what I'm
life.
saying. It's like the worst case scenario of real life, right? Where there's all these people that need help, but because the corporations run everything and all they care is about the bottom line, all these people are suffering for it and they don't care. And the game does a really good job of representing that and showing the downside of it. I don't think it definitely does not cherry pick, in my opinion. It does not make one sign. It doesn't glorify one thing over the other.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that's really funny too, is that because you hear sometimes, especially lately, it's like, oh, I don't like when my games are political. And it's like, yeah, if you played any like game with any sort of corporation, like, it's political, because it's going to be talking about class inequalities. It's going to be talking about, income issues, supply and demand, like all those things factor into like politics, and especially with a game series like Deus Ex. In the first game, there's this conspiracy, because UNACO's, investigating this conspiracy within the, I don't remember what the name of the organization is, but it's like this terrorist organization, and they're pretty much working for a corporation, right?
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And as far as that goes, it's like it just hits home so much, especially with the political climate that we have right now, because now more people are aware of it. You know, it's not new. It's not new at all. It's just become more well known because of things like the internet and globalization and social media and stuff like that. It's just it's just crazy to think that these games really kind of reflect real life. They're almost like an allegory for real life for us in the United States. And I mean, and pretty much any developed country with, you know, big inequalities between the classes and stuff.
Well, they nail that very well too in that series, especially with Human Revolution and I guess Mankind Divided. Just their setting is how they're telling like a real world scenario, kind of, but just using these different characters and factions and stuff inside the games. But yeah, it is very close to like things that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
Politically, anyway.
Oh, yeah, I think like even in Mankind Divided, they get more into like the segregational issues of like, you know, being augmented versus non-augmented. And like one of the cool things, like, you know, it's cool, but it's also like sad and unfortunate because it really does happen, and it has happened. Is like where you like if you're taking like the subway moving in between maps, like, you know, it's inconsequential. Like you could pick like non-aug or aug side, but then like every once in a while, like if you go on the non-augmented side and once you board off, like the police hassle you on the other side of where you're at. They're like, "Why are you on the non-aug side?" And it's like, "Watch yourself." Like I'm like, "The hell?" I'm like, "Why is this?" I'm like, "What?" But it's a real thing that happens. Like you know, it's like it's discrimination. It's like and like Mankind Divided, like really they harbor in on like the discrimination part, like really a lot.
No, and you know, and I think that's a really good thing to bring up too. Is that that just seeing that kind of prejudice, it's very socially aware, because it does make it feel like a real world, which sucks because that the real world is like that. But at the same time, it's a good way to tell the story and make it relatable. What about you, Gino? Anything to contribute to this?
No, I'm waiting to tell my grand story.
Well, if you guys want to go on to the next question, I think this is more towards Gino. And feel free to expand on it, Gino, but the question itself is, what were your feelings about how Mankind Divided concluded, and do you think they'll continue the series in the future?
Yeah, I'm going to expand on it.
Yeah.
Because I think you okay, so I'll tell my big one. I don't know if you all want the short version or longer version. Okay.
Go for it, man.
So I couldn't play I'm going to turn this. No. So I couldn't play the first one initially because I didn't have a computer that supported it. And then I played Invisible War. And then, you know, I liked the experience that I had. And then when they first announced it, you know, I remember getting really excited about it. Like, man, that's going to be cool. But everything has a shelf life, right? So by the time it finally came out, I almost canceled my order for it. I'm like, you know, I mean, it's been so long. I kind of care, but I kind of don't. So I, you know, finally when it came out, I said, you know, I'm just going to keep it. It'll be cool. And I couldn't decide. You know, Christmas comes and I'm like, well, what do I play now? You know? So here's where like it all intersects. I don't know that it actually intersects at this point, but so it's New Year's Eve of 2011, and my best friend is getting married. And
hey, I didn't get married.
Yeah. Well, we're already married, right? So one of my best friends was getting married. And we won't say who it is because I was in love with this girl for like years and years and years. Not anymore. At this point, it was like, oh, you know, no, it's no big deal. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be fun. there was no like emotional attachment there, but there's still history, right? So then there was that, and then simultaneously, like I'm in love with this other girl who like I'm just about to ask out. I think the same day, and she calls to tell me like, oh, well, I'm getting married. So whatever. So I go to this wedding. And there's a lot of emotion at this wedding. It's like, oh my god, it was just kind of unbearable. And so I get home, and it's just past midnight, I think, or 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. And my sister, who's in like Hawaii, calls me, and she says, our roommate was just murdered. And so I lived in Austin for about 5 years. And, I lived with my sister, and we had roommates also. And this girl, she, it was terrible because she was this really sweet girl, just really nice, the most gentle person you'd want to meet, And so she's murdered New Year's Eve, and my sister is calling me from Hawaii on a volcano side, the side of a volcano or something. And so this is what I go into, and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. So all this is happening in one day, and like for some reason at 2:00, I'm like, you know what? Where's that Deus Ex? So like the misery just compounds into this this moment when I start playing Deus Ex, and it just I don't know, man. Like they say games pick you, and that was one of those times where it just absolutely picked me. And I think it is, and it will always be. It's in my top, I would say top, God. It's got to be in the top 5 because it just defined what I wanted from games, I think, from that point. Because it's, it's not about violence, it's not about guns, it's very cerebral, it's asking big questions. It does it in a really beautiful way. The entire thing is really melancholy, I mean all of it. And I just thought it was so brilliant, so much about it, and it just like it hit home. And I think that's a gaming experience, I think, that changed my life. I mean, that was just it just was the perfect moment. It was the perfect game. So yeah, I mean, I could go on about it, but yeah, that's the long story.
You wrote about that, didn't you?
So
yeah, I remember reading an article. You said you were talking about all this stuff. Sorry, go ahead, Frank.
no, I was just gonna ask. So what do you think about the way that Mankind Divided ended, though? As far as like,
yeah, so Human Revolution does this beautiful thing of like just making everything so very I don't know, tactile. Like you feel it, and it's asking these big questions. And then you go to Mankind Divided, and it's not a bad game. It really isn't. And that's not what I want to get across, but it isn't asking those big questions, really, I don't think. Not as much as the first one. And it's not doing it in a way that's really trying to get at you. I think they tackle moments in it. There's a side mission where there's somebody like inside this machine or like on the side of a road somewhere, and it's like an AI, but it's not an AI. I mean, that was the closest thing, and it was really beautiful. Like this one mission, and there were some others, but that one was the one that struck me that was most like Mankind, like Human Revolution. So I think Mankind Divided, I think they stripped away a lot of that psychology from Human Revolution, and they made it just more accessible, which is to its detriment, because I think that's what made Human Revolution so brilliant, is that it wasn't trying to be for everybody, So, but yeah, I still liked Mankind Divided. I still want to finish that series, and I love that voice actor. I mean, he is that character. So I can't. I will say that I think Cyberpunk is going to put that development, the Deus Ex 3, back by about 10 years. I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon. So
I do know that they had it planned for a third game, but then they canceled it at the time because the company was moved over to work on the Tomb Raider game at the time.
And then one of the heads of IDOS who headed off Deus Ex had left as well.
So it's kind of in limbo right now, I guess. I would like to see them finish it off, though. Do you have anything else to add, Gina?
No, I mean, I could go on about those two games for forever and ever and ever. I will say that, the first one, since it's in total darkness, I think the whole thing. And then to have this very harsh, daylight setting for most of it, in Mankind Divided, really, that's the first thing that kind of took me out of it. So yeah, but I mean, I still love both games. But yeah, this Mankind Divided, I wanted more from it, I think.
And I think that's the way most people felt.
But I think part of what you lose in Mankind Divided is whereas Deus Ex Human Revolution, because it's the prequel to the whole series, has to introduce all these concepts and explain how the world is working. So everything that's happening is underlying. It hasn't been exposed. And on top of that, it takes place in an American city, Detroit, which we, for years now have been looking at it as one of the fallen cities of our country, right? We look at it as it's destitute. It's one of the worst, or at least for a long time, it's had a lot of issues with corruption, and crime because of the corruption.
And corruption.
But that's its main focus. It takes place in Detroit, and so it's very much an American story. And in Mankind Divided, it takes place in Prague. And there's nothing wrong with moving to the city. The city isn't the issue. The issue, I think, is that by the time Human Revolution ends, pretty much everything's been exposed. You know what's going on. You know who's at fault, and you're trying to find out more information. But at that point, there's no more. It doesn't feel like there's more mystery to it. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, hey, we told this story, and you guys figured it out. And then it's like, well, then how do we expand on that? It's kind of like with the original Matrix movie, where the original Matrix, the way it ended was like, well, now they're free. I mean, you don't really need to go further than that. But then it's like, oh, the movie is so popular, now let's make 2 more. And they had a really hard time coming up with a story to follow up that first movie that encapsulated everything so perfectly. And that's the same thing with me with Human Revolution, where everything story-wise was encapsulated so perfectly in that first game that it was very difficult for them to figure out how to follow it up with Mankind Divided and expand on it and maintain that sense of mystery. So I think, like what AJ said earlier, when it did an excellent job maintaining the gameplay, or maybe it was Mike who said that, story-wise it wasn't as engaging because it was obvious that they were having a difficult time creating a follow-up.
Yeah, and it does feel like it's kind of like all the stuff happened in Human Revolution, and then this is just like the aftermath, I guess. And the other thing I personally noticed with it is very short compared to the other games in the series. There's a point at the end, it just kind of feels like it just abruptly ends to me, honestly. I mean, I guess they kind of resolve the in-game story points. I didn't go back and try to get any of the other endings, but I felt like they were setting up for diving into that kind of New World Order-ish organization. I forgot what it's called. Like whatever the next game is going to be is more about that, or it's going to be about that. And I don't know. I felt like they intended to make a longer game, and they just ended up releasing like half of a full game.
You may be
instead.
right. It may be suffering from the idea. It was they're trying to plan out a franchise before they have one solid idea to continue with.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of the development was also because of Square. They kind of EA'd the whole game with let's focus on the DLC and with the different like. I remember one of the biggest issues with Mankind Divided was the pre-order like tiers. It's like, once we hit this many pre-orders, then this will be available. And if you pre-order from here, then you'll get this. And it's like you're so focused on the wrong thing.
There's like 5 different like types of like versions of the game they were planning on making.
Because it was like Walmart, GameStop, Amazon, Best Buy, and I forgot the other one. It might have just been 4, but yeah, like to where you would get different, DLC and it's. I'm glad that it blew up in the face and ended up just making it available for anybody who purchased the best edition or whatever.
Given how the game came out, I wonder what it would have been like if you had to buy 5 different copies of the game. Like, I mean, that's just, I don't know. I don't think the game was long enough to warrant splitting it up that way.
Well, did you play any of the DLC missions? Because I know there was like 3 or 4.
I thought it was 2.
I don't remember how many there were.
Oh, maybe it was just 2.
I think there's 3, I think, and I played 2 of the 3. Only reason I didn't finish was because I got stuck at some part where you have to take out like all these turrets, and like I was getting mowed down. So I said, I'll come back to this tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. But I need to finish it. I want to finish it because the story was cool.
Yeah. Well, I bought it. Well, I got it digitally because it was one of the PS Plus games from before, and then the season pass for it ended up being there's 3. Yeah. The season pass for it goes on sale pretty often, so I bought the season pass, which has all like the ammo packs and the DLC. It was like $3, so I just wondered how much it really added to the overall gameplay experience, like how much more gameplay you really got from it.
You can probably finish it in about maybe a day or 2. Not much.
That's Geno talk. I want like actual like gameplay average time. Like, are they like 1 to 3 hours for the each mission or something like that?
I haven't played. I mean, I played the game when it came out, and I don't remember how long it took me. I want to say like anywhere between maybe even like 15 hours.
But what about?
You're talking about Mankind Divided,
Yeah,
right?
I was talking about the DLC. Hang on.
Oh, the DLC? I have no idea. I never played
Frank's
the DLC.
frozen. May have lost him.
Oh, with the DLC too.
Hang on,
No, I'm here.
Your camera's still messing up.
Yeah.
You're dancing really fast. Oh, it was actually you.
No, he was going fast, and then it was just him at normal speed, which is fast.
AJ, did your headset die on you? Did you need to
Yes, it did, actually.
plug it in so you can go back and using it?
No, it's fine like this.
See, this is why I'm against wireless shit. It's like you gotta charge it. Like, see, I mean, yeah, I got a cord, but anyway, that's just my old man yelling at a cloud moment. That's why I still go with wires as often as I can.
Yeah, I have all my stuff plugged
All right,
in.
AJ, I want to hear your take.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I haven't beat Mankind Divided yet.
Cool.
I'm still working through it just because I don't know. Like, I bought it, like Frank said, on sale one time. Like, the whole package, the whole shebang was on sale for, I think, like, I want to say like $12 at one point. I was like, yeah, cool. I was like, let me grab it. And I've been working my way through it, like, slowly but surely, and just for no other reason, just because I get stuck playing other things. But, from what I've heard, like, the ending itself isn't all that great. It doesn't really wrap things up all that great and just leaves everything kind of hanging. So, I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, but yeah, I really haven't actually beaten that one.
I'm really glad I didn't go into detail when I was talking about the way that ended.
No, I mean, even if you do, like, it's fine.
At this point, I don't think we're worried about spoilers. I mean, I do think the Deus Ex universe is ripe for more games. The fact that they didn't continue it in a way where looking at Invisible War and saying, okay, how do we create a sequel to this game? And instead, let's just create another game within that universe. I don't see why another company or maybe IDOS, when they do another game, continue with that concept where, okay, let's go with another character and let's build a game around this other part of the universe. You know, there's no reason why, because there's always stuff happening concurrently. When you're playing the game, that's what makes the world building so beautiful. Is you hear about all these other things that are going on. Why can't they take a character that's from Europe that maybe works for Interpol or something, and maybe they're doing something in Europe and having to take care of it that somehow ties into the events that lead to what happens in Prague and Mankind Divided? I mean, there are all kinds of things you can do with a universe like this. That's why the world building is so important, and that's why I think that's why they can build another game. I think why they're so hesitant, though, is because Mankind Divided didn't sell as well as they want. And, you know, sometimes these game companies don't face up to the facts and realize that they were their own worst enemy. And as soon as something fails, they'll be like, okay, well, the fans didn't want to play it. And, like, that wasn't the case. It's because you presented it to us in such a shitty way that it made it difficult to not only prevent people who hadn't played the game before to buy into it, but also make the fans angry to the point where they waited until they had to sell it dirt cheap before they picked it up. I mean, come on, it was a PlayStation Plus exclusive for a month. Or not exclusive, but a free-to-play game for a month. And that's where it started kind of picking up traction again, because people were like, oh, well, I loved Human Revolution. I heard this one was that great, but now that it's free, let me download it and try it out. But they don't look at it that way, you know, because they do things all from a business perspective. And I get that to a certain degree, but obviously when you don't have people in place that are telling you why your game screwed up, you know, then you're going to always conclude that, well, because the fans didn't want it. And really, that's not the case here. We want more Deus Ex. There's a fan base out there because Human Revolution did really well, and not because it was a fluke. It's because it was a damn good game. And if they continue in that mold, they can definitely release something that's even more good, especially with what we can do with PCs now, and obviously with the new PS5 and the Xbox X series are capable of doing. Imagine how incredible that gameplay could be and how beautiful those worlds could look. I mean, at this point, the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. Well, and you know, and you brought up a really good point too, and that's honestly, I think that's what more companies should do, is that they should, if they're really wanting to invest the time into an IP, is create these different stories within the same universe, either running, you know, along the same lines, or like what we had talked about with Dead Space. To where you don't have to continue the story from the same protagonist. You can, you know, still, you know, after chronologically from where the first game left off, but then go with a different character, or like what they did with Extraction. You know, it's like it's very possible to do that, especially with a world like Deus Ex, where it's got so many moving parts. It's got so many pieces that could, you know, easily be fit into it. I mean, look at Alien Isolation. That game, it added to the mythos. It didn't contradict anything that happened, you know, on the timeline, you know, between what was it, Alien and Aliens. Like they just added to it and gave more of a story. And I think that's absolutely what they should do with Deus Ex. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like Gino said, the guy who voiced Adam Jensen, it's so he did such an interesting job because his voice is so unique. It doesn't even sound like somebody you would think is like, you know, like a Troy Baker or a Nolan North, where it's like this silky smooth, and they're doing these impressions. You know, he's got this gruff voice. Did you fix it, Pritchard? You know, and I think his performance actually really fleshes out that character too, because you can tell he's just this bitter, you know, very didn't ask for this, you know, guy. I don't know, there's just so much that they could do with that universe. It's a cyberpunk universe. In all honesty, like cyberpunk universes are very easy to fill, you know, to kind of put into, because they all have very similar themes. They all have very similar technology, but a lot of them have just very specific things to those universes. Like you compare something like The Matrix, which is still kind of regarded as a cyberpunk, you know, to compare to something like Blade Runner. or Deus Ex compared to other cyberpunk stuff, whatever. You know what I mean?
Did anyone play The Rise of Tomb Raider?
That was the third one, right?
Because that was, I think so.
Yeah,
Shadow's the third one.
I think Shadow.
I played Rise of Tomb
Shadow,
Raider.
yeah.
That's the second one. I played the first two. I still haven't played Shadow.
How was it? Because that was the game that they made instead of.
I think it bombed because I think Shadow was. It was either that one or Rise that ended up being free on PlayStation Plus. But I think that
Well,
one
actually,
didn't
no,
do
it was
well.
Shadow that didn't do well. Rise. I think they expected it to do better than what it actually did because of how popular the first one was. But it's one of those things where it sold about as well, but they invested so much more money into it, thinking that they were going to make the product better just by throwing more money. And I mean, as we see time and time again, like the other problem is all these big companies like Square Enix are always trying to make these blockbuster games. It's like that's all they do now is they just want to make blockbuster games. They don't want to do anything small. They don't want to do anything that when it sells 1 million copies, it still makes you money.
Lost you guys.
What?
No, there you go.
No, he just said that
okay.
he couldn't see us.
I'm jumping in and out. I don't know why. Something's going on with my home network, man. I don't know what's going on.
Must be all them cyberpunks.
So, well, that's why there's two hosts.
You know what? That's what I was going to say. It's a conspiracy because it's taken us so long to actually do this podcast, and then we're having technical issues. It's like they don't want our stories to be told about 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
The tragic events of 7-Eleven.
Oh man. Yeah, but I just think game companies need to like. I'm gonna use Ubisoft as an example here, where with their Assassin's Creed games, and to their credit, they have created a very fascinating universe with Assassin's Creed. And the other positive I want to point out is like when they failed with Unity and how badly it came out, and they patched it up. They didn't then say, okay, Assassin's Creed is dead, and then they just moved on to something else. They revisited and see how they could improve it. And Syndicate came out. Syndicate was better, but it still wasn't great. But then they released Origins, and they started finding, particularly with Odyssey, like Odyssey is the one that got all the rave reviews. So they found a way back, right? They found a way to improve the game. And that's something that these companies can do, but they have to be really willing to take that financial risk. In the case of Ubisoft, they're fortunate where the owners of the company, Vez Goumont, or however you pronounce his name, you're French in their names, right? He believes in the system because basically it's his baby, right? It's like Rayman and Assassin's Creed are his two babies. So the problem with Square Enix is the higher ups, it's not their baby, right? Because they're paying Eidos Montreal. It's their baby. So Eidos Montreal needs to convince them. So, I mean, if Eidos could find a way to just fund their own game and not have to worry about getting a publisher to do it, they might be able to bring that thing back. But I don't think, we need a Deus Ex game that is, bigger than everything else. The one thing I am worried about is if they allow a big company to fund them, they're going to say, well, we need to make it more open world. And just for the sake of making it more open world, because that seems to be the thing. I mean, the open world games that work that are popular is because they're good games and they're well designed. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't get all the attention it gets because we can see the balls on a horse. It's not because you can run around in random locations and just, shoot whoever you want. It's because there's compelling gameplay throughout. And it's the same thing with the GTA series, the same thing with most of the Assassin's Creed games. And with Deus Ex, you already have a compelling game. You just need to get a company that believes that they can do it without getting in the way of the developers at Eidos.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then there's also like the other elephant in the room of Cyberpunk 2077 coming out and seeing how that's going to go. Like if it follows, traditional CD Projekt Red standards, it's going to be pretty good. And that's going to kind of put a whole kibosh on like that, unfortunately, that whole genre for a while, which is kind of going to suck because, not that I want, Cyberpunk to fail. I want it to do amazing because, it looks amazing. There's going to be pretty awesome. But, at the same time, I think like everything else in that genre is going to suffer just because no people are going to be like, we can't touch that, like, depending on how well it does, And so if it's, like I said, like usual standard fare, then it's going to be pretty awesome, and it's going to put a hamper and be like, well, how do we do Deus Ex without people being like, oh, it's the next cyberpunk, and so it gets a little.
I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just think that, let's say Cyberpunk 2077 does amazingly well, right? And everyone loves it. It gets all these great reviews. Typically, don't these companies go, okay, how can we replicate that? And I think, that's what I'm saying. I think my worry is that they're going to go, oh, well, you know what? We already have the Cyberpunk property in Deus Ex. Let's make it more like Cyberpunk. That's my worry, and that's what I don't want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you also make a good point. Maybe because it will be so well done, people won't try doing it. But I mean, when GTA 3 did so incredibly well, so many GTA clones came out, and some of them were successful, and many of them were terrible. But that's what I think would happen. Now, my other worry is that if 2077 does fail, then you're right. It would put it on the kibosh, I think.
Yeah. And so it's really one of those interesting things. I mean, you can never go wrong with more of the genre, more of the characters, or anything like that, But, it kind of puts like things like on hold for a while. And like, I don't blame them for like not rushing out and saying, hey, we got a new Deus Ex coming out, Is like you said, like, the technology is great now. We can have like open world situations, like, like things won't be looking as processed as it did like in the PS3 or PS4 versions of these games, And then like, you have your controllers now that can have like haptic feedback and all this good stuff. Like the technology is there to play with this concept of technology in video games. And so, like I want to see what happens. And I think like this universe is great for that, just because it's not afraid to ask those questions, like Gino said.
And another part of it too, though, is they really need to make sure whatever they write for it is they spend a lot of time on the story. That's what made Human Revolution so great.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they, if they do a continuation, I don't know. I was a little disappointed with the way Mankind presented
I'm like AJ,
itself,
where I didn't finish it because honestly, I got bored.
Yeah, there was a point where I had to push through, man, because I was just kind of like, I don't really want to do this right now. Like Prague is pretty much, I don't know, that's like the only city you see in the game, I think. And I remember in Human Revolution, you were bouncing from like Tokyo and like all the other
Detroit,
places
Hong
that you
Kong,
visited in that. Yeah, Detroit, Hong Kong. It was like, it felt bigger than Mankind Divided was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's gonna. I don't think it's honestly going to be a lesson that the game companies really learn. It's because anything that doesn't make them a huge profit, they're going to consider a failure. And you think about like how many dead franchises and IPs there are simply because, not that the games didn't sell, it's just they didn't sell amazingly, so companies just abandoned it. They're like, we'll look for the next biggest thing. And it's funny too, because I remember reading an article, was it like 2014 or 2015, where they were already predicting the next big video game like industry crash because of things like microtransactions and how there's not true upgrades to systems and stuff like that, because they're saying from PS3 to PS4, and it's like it was an improvement, but not compared to like the PS2 to the PS3 or PS1 to the PS2. Like, and I don't think that like we'll have a proper video game crash. I think if anything, we're kind of experiencing it now just because of the pandemic. We're not really seeing a whole lot of huge titles being pushed out. Like this year has been kind of dead, overall for due to circumstances.
Well, my counterpoint.
Yeah, in a year with 2 next-gen consoles coming out.
My counterpoint to that is the last several, really this generation in general, there have been an overwhelming amount of games to come out during the year, and it's hard to keep track of everything. And the pandemic has created breathing room to allow some of those games that may have been ignored to get to see some light of day and get some attention. I think spreading out some of these games has been to a benefit to other games that we may not pay attention to. I mean, it's probably not the best example, but like, I didn't expect Animal Crossing to become the huge seller. It's sold something like 25 million copies already. And it's been out for less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Animal Crossing, right? And I know the Switch is super popular, but we're talking about, like a quarter of the install base of Switch owners now, because I think the number of Switch owners has now hit the 65 million mark or something, because now it's outsold the original Nintendo. And so, I mean, we're talking about nearly a quarter of the people who own a Switch, or over a quarter of the people who own a Switch, have a copy of Animal Crossing. And that is not a type of game, blockbuster game that we would think of. Or in the summer, you had releases of games like Ghost of Tsushima, which, those games sold a lot because they also were not surrounded by 3 other huge releases.
Competing.
And so I think if they probably won't, but I'm hoping that the publishers can learn from this and understand that, hey, maybe spacing things out isn't a bad idea. Like for me, Cyberpunk being delayed wasn't a big deal. I think people make a big deal about it because it's been delayed multiple times.
No,
but I come back.
Yeah.
But you come back to the fact that you're hoping they're delaying it because they're trying to make the best game possible, right? They're not trying to salvage something.
Well, it's CD Projekt Red, so I do
they have a pedigree
believe that they are. Now, if it was somebody, if it was something from like Ubisoft or EA, it'd be like they're delaying it because they don't want to compete with like another game's release date, or they're delaying it because like there's a production issue, not because they're trying to make a better game. Better game.
We've seen those situations where they just force games out, and then we as consumers pay for it because we buy a game that ends up not being what they said it was going to be, and then either we wait for patches, but then that hurts them in the long run too. Obviously, we see that happen a lot. So I don't know. I mean, come on, for like the last 15 years, there's always someone predicting the crash of the video game market. And
video game industry. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't really agree with that. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's not going to be a crash. It's going to be more just where, it's really going to just kind of change the way like gaming industry is really handled as far as game releases. And I mean, it's already changed a huge amount just in the past 10 years. I mean, microtransactions before were not really popular, and now it's just about every single game has got them in some way, shape, or form in the form of like DLC or loot boxes and stuff like that.
Mankind Divided did have that kind of monetization where you could buy credits and stuff to purchase things in game.
And then I don't know how
money.
the DLC for Mankind Divided fits in, but it does feel like, the original game felt short. And then suddenly you have 3 DLC packs to expand the story, and it makes you wonder, so that Square Enix then have them remove chunks of the game so they could release these DLC to make more money?
Yeah.
Which I would not put beyond them.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Because I didn't expect them to have any DLC when it came out. I thought that was like the whole game. And I don't remember, well, I guess I should have expected it because of the way they were trying to market it in the beginning. Like with the different tiers of game you could do.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I should have expected them to be holding something back to release later.
Well, I mean, like I don't know how it really adds to it. It just
I don't either.
Because there's right way to do DLC and there's wrong way. Like for me, like one of the right ways that I've seen DLC was like the first Last of Us with the Left Behind DLC. Because they added to the story. It didn't take away from the main campaign at all. Whereas something like Mass Effect 3, where if you don't have From Ashes DLC, you're actually missing a good part of the story, especially since Javik is so really vital to getting background on the Reapers and everything like that.
Well, it's even like with Human Revolution, they had the one DLC pack. I forget what it's called. The Missing Link.
Link.
It had no forbearance on the main gameplay if you missed it, because it takes place in the middle of the story and it just adds to a part of the game that you didn't get to experience. But by missing it, you don't lose anything in the game either. So that, to me, that's DLC done right. But like, you take a game like Azura's Wrath from Capcom, and we all know like that game ended in a way where it was obviously not concluded, and there were 2 DLC packs for that one.
Yeah.
Right, and then one of those DLC packs gave you the ending of the game. It actually concluded.
Yeah, the actual ending.
That was really. I actually bought that game on Xbox Live like a year or 2 ago, and it did come with those DLC endings. Thankfully, because I never played them when the game was actually released. But yeah, that's like bad DLC. I don't want games to like pick up on that trend.
Well, they already have, unfortunately.
Yeah, but like, I mean, like, I don't want it to become the norm. Is I guess what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to play Legend of Zelda and not fight Ganon, and if I don't buy the DLC, you know what I mean?
Like you
I know
beat the
what
last
you mean,
dungeon just to find out there's a DLC pack where there's an extra dungeon where you actually fight Ganon.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't see games doing that yet, but
Well, they actually have. I mean, not
yeah, but not
many
like
of them.
all of them. Like,
well, yeah,
not like a normal thing. You're never going to see that in a Zelda game. At least I hope not.
No, you won't.
And that's what I mean. I know it's being done, like to a lesser extent, but I just hope that doesn't ever
that it doesn't become the norm.
More.
Yeah.
I don't know what time we changed the podcast, or started a new podcast, but
I don't know. We've been on this one for a while. Like this new topic.
Well, I mean, it ties into it, though. I mean, because it ties back to the question, because Mankind Divided ended very abruptly. I mean, that's what was your main complaint, and that's why I asked this question, is because, with the DLC, does it really add to the game? Do you think that they should continue it? If maybe like do like Bobby said and just tell a different story in that same universe. I mean,
I would say do that, honestly. I mean, as much as I'd like to see an end to this with Adam Jensen anyway.
You said you had played 2 of the DLC packs, so how do you think they fit into the main game? Do they add to the ending, or do they blend in with the main story? What is your opinion, or what do you think?
I would say they're more in line with just kind of. I don't quote me on this because I haven't played them in a few years, but it felt more like something that was inside of the main story, not like after the end of the game.
So do you think they were worth adding to the game?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, anytime you get to mess with Pritchard, it's
so
fun.
What's your opinion on this? I mean, did it bother you that you had to get additional DLC to expand the play, or were you satisfied with the amount of time you were able to put into Mankind Divided?
As far as like being upset that there was DLC,
well, first of all,
or that I had to
Divided,
get,
did you feel that it was too short, especially compared to Human Revolution, or did you feel the narrative was satisfying?
For me, it was satisfying only because I thought we're getting Deus Ex 3, or the next. We're getting it's a trilogy. We're going to get an ending. So it's fine to leave something kind of unresolved, but then you get into the weeds when it's like, oh hey, we're gonna drop this series and go work on the Marvel Avengers game for Square Enix. So that's where it gets. Yeah, so once I heard that, then it was frustrating.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the Marvel's Avengers game has bombed so bad that they're like, I think they went from having like, I think 6 or 5-digit player base down to, I think just last week it was like 400 at peak.
Yeah.
But was it Eidos Montreal who worked on that game?
Yeah, there were developers. That's the main reason they left the Deus Ex series, was they were, I guess, contracted by Marvel to do that garbage.
Good.
Well,
think-
I'm not, because
failed
what's going to happen? Square
because-
Enix is going to. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, because so is
Close the
IDOS part
studio?
of Square Enix, or are they just contracted for the game? Because that's the other thing. Because if they're actually a Square Enix studio, then yeah, Square Enix can close them down. But I don't know how they're attached to them.
I think they. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But I don't know if they're like part of an internal development team, or they're just on their own. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want it to do bad for that reason. But I mean, just get back to what I love. I don't give a shit about Avengers. I mean, who cares? But that's just. I mean, there's plenty of people that were like, I can't wait for an Avengers game.
There is
Okay, because I was just remembering
Square
that
Enix,
the
apparently.
PC version of Final Fantasy VII was developed by IDOS. So they've been with Square Enix, so they are a subsidiary.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it doesn't end up shutting down the studio, because that's the one thing published. That's another. We talked about this last time with Dead Space, with Visceral Games, that EA shut down Visceral because they didn't make a good enough game to make it money, when it was the studio, or when it was the publishers jumping in and continuing to change things. And again, I mean, you're putting the blame on the wrong people, and you're punishing the wrong people. I mean, it's just, it sucks, because then you have these good studios that then they can't produce good works, because these people who don't know what they're doing step in and try to make decisions.
Yeah. That's why, like, if I ever won the lottery and, it was like one of the huge, like $300 or $300 million like amounts, I'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to start a game company. With $300, I'd be a millionaire.
By 300.
But, I would just, I'd start like a firm and just start purchasing like a lot of these old IPs, just to get them away from these game companies that don't do anything with them, or, at least do something better with them. Because, I mean, one IP that I can think of is like Double Dragon, where they came out with an amazing game. Like Double Dragon Neon is exactly what they needed. And that game underperformed like crazy because, it was digital only, and it was coming out at a time when, I mean, it was like retro was kind of getting popular again, but it hadn't really hit its stride. And what did we end up getting years later was Double Dragon 4, which that game is a piece of shit. It's terrible. And now, who is it? It's who has the IP now?
Atlas owns
Arxis.
ArcWorks or whatever. Yeah.
Arxis. They have it now, and it's like, are they going to do anything with it? No, probably. I mean, maybe come out with another mediocre trash game, but like a lot of these IPs, they just need to be taken away from all these publishers.
At least they filled in the
pick them
gap
up.
between Double Dragon 3 and Double Dragon 5.
I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna bite my tongue.
You know what? I'm like, we have to do a Double Dragon podcast, like even if it's just Gino and me.
Anytime and anywhere.
Nice.
But I mean, I don't know. We could talk about this all day. So, and I think this is definitely our most ADD episode ever. So, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Are there any final thoughts that you all want to share about Deus Ex and our wonderful, hiatus cyberpunk adventure universe?
The soundtrack Revolution.
Oh yeah, soundtracks are good.
I'm surprised Gino didn't bring it up.
Even from the first game.
Yeah.
Oh, I just don't want to go off on a tangent.
That's all we've done this podcast. And at least if you went up on a podcast on a tangent in this podcast, it would at least be about what we were originally talking about.
It would ironically be very consistent with this podcast if you went off on a tangent.
No,
well, seeing the evidence before me, yes, you're right.
But yeah, we probably shouldn't. So
Okay, well, if you've stuck with us this far, I really want to say thank you. I do want to thank our guests, Bobby, AJ, and Gino for joining. Mike and me, and Mike, of course, it's always a pleasure to have you co-host. If you haven't played Deus Ex, I'd say definitely start with Human Revolution. I think that's probably the best place to start. And unless you have that nostalgic love like I do for old PC games, then start with the first one. But it's definitely a story worth checking out. It's a pretty cool universe, and you can get most of the games. I mean, you could probably buy all 4 games for under $100. So
there's a sale on Steam. Well, not a sale, but they're all on Steam in a bundle.
And if you do decide to play that original Deus Ex, make sure to
68.
download the GDX patch or patch or mod. There you go.
Yeah,
it's totally for free. Enhances the game, makes it significantly better play, helps reduce the issues with darkness, except apparently for Frank.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Invisible War is 97 cents.
What?
Yep.
It's
well, I have all
the
of them
same
except
worth as
for
a pack of
Invisible
gum.
War,
What the hell?
You know what? Let me see. I think I actually have Mankind Divided. Yep. I bought Mankind Divided for $4.
Nice.
So yeah, they are all. You could honestly probably get them all for less than $30 on sale. But anyway, thank you all for joining me, gentlemen. And just as a quick reminder, and this time during the pandemic, check yourself. Make sure you're staying healthy. Make sure you're staying indoors, masked if you go out. And not only that, but check in with family members and friends. It's really good to make sure that your mental health is as good as your physical health. Unless, of course, your physical health is garbage, to make sure your mental health is better. So thank you all, and you all enjoy your evening or day whenever you listen to this.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Mike. Peace out.
Peace.
Deus Ex Machina. God from the machine. What does it all mean? They're trying to become gods through machinery. Duh. Title aside, the Deus Ex series does an incredible job bringing several gameplay and narrative elements together, and weaves them in a way that is both engaging and progressive. If the latest attempts at RPG cyberpunk influenced games have left you feeling unfulfilled, then maybe it's time to find your god in the machine. See what I did there? Oh, sorry. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Next time on OCGamer Podcast, we discuss the fall, rise, fall and rise again of the God of War. Peace!
This episode of the Obsessive Compulsive Gamer Podcast was produced by Bobby, edited by Mike B, and hosted by Frank. If you would like to know more about the music used in this episode, please check the link in the description. Thanks for watching and listening. Check out our website at ocgamer.org for more episodes and articles on gaming.